The Seattle sky had never looked so gray as it did the day Claire Matthews found the box. It wasn't just any box. It was an old shoe box, worn at the corners, tied with a simple string, and hidden in the false bottom of Michael's desk drawer. 3 weeks had passed since the funeral. 3 weeks of deafening silence in a house that had once been filled with the sound of Michael's laughter, his off-key songs in the shower, the sound of his fingers tapping incessantly on the keyboard in the wee hours of the morning as he worked on yet another of his mysterious projects. You should get started sorting through his things, Claire's sister had gently suggested the day before. It might help you move on. Claire didn't want to move anywhere. At 42, after 17 years of marriage, she felt as if she'd been ripped from the life she knew and thrown into a parallel universe where nothing made sense. A brain aneurysm. Swift, unexpected, irreversible. The doctor had explained how these things just happen sometimes, even to healthy men of 45. He didn't suffer, the doctor assured her, as if that were any consolation. But now, with the box in her hands, a new kind of pain began to take shape. The unsettling feeling that perhaps she didn't know the man she'd shared her life with as well as she thought she did. Claire untied the knot in the string with trembling fingers. The first thing she saw was an old photograph, yellowed with age. In it, Michael, much younger, perhaps 20, was arm in arm with a woman Claire had never seen before. Behind the photo was a single handwritten line. To my darling Michael, forever yours, Rebecca. Who the hell is Rebecca? Claire murmured to the empty room. Beneath the photograph was a stack of letters, all addressed to Michael, all with the same return address in Portland, Oregon. The dates varied. Some were over 20 years old, others only 2 years old. Claire picked up the most recent one and began to read. My dearest Michael, I understand your decision. I truly do. Your loyalty has always been your most admirable quality, even when it breaks my heart. Our weekend in San Francisco was like stealing time that was never meant to be ours. I keep telling myself that I should be grateful for those stolen moments throughout the years, rather than bitter about the life we couldn't share. Emily asked about you again. She's so smart, Michael. Sometimes when she looks at me with those thoughtful eyes, your eyes, I almost tell her everything. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday you will. Until next time, if there is a next time. All my love, Rebecca. Claire let the letter fall from her hands as if it were on fire. Emily, a daughter. Her Michael, her loyal, loving, honest husband, had a daughter with another woman? A daughter who must now be, Claire did the math quickly, in her 20s. Claire's hands were now frantically sorting through the rest of the box's contents. Bank statements showed regular transfers to an account in Portland, small gifts that had never been delivered, a delicate bracelet inscribed, to Emily, on your 16th birthday. Wish I could be there. M. A thumb drive, simply labeled, for C, if you ever find this. Claire stood still, clutching the flash drive. Her mind was spinning with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. For a moment, she considered throwing the entire box out the window, pretending she had never found it. But the truth, as awful as it was preferable to the shadows of doubt that now loomed in her mind, tainting every memory she had of her marriage. With a deep sigh, she turned on her laptop and inserted the flash drive. A single video file. The thumbnail showed Michael's face. Claire clicked it, and suddenly, there he was, alive, breathing, staring right at her through the screen. Hey, Claire, he began, his voice so familiar that Claire felt as if someone were squeezing her heart inside her chest. If you're watching this, well, I guess I never found the courage to tell you the truth while I was still around, and that makes me the worst kind of coward. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so characteristic of his that Claire could almost feel the strands between her own fingers. I don't even know where to begin, Claire Bear, he continued, using the nickname that had always made Claire roll her eyes and smile at the same time. I suppose the beginning is as good a place as any. And so, through a computer screen, Michael Matthews began to tell a story that went back before Claire, to a time when he was just a young literature student in Portland. He talked about meeting Rebecca in a poetry class, about their intense summer romance, and about how everything changed when, in the fall, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. I was 21, terrified, and completely unprepared to be a father, Michael confessed, his eyes fixed on the camera, as if he were begging Claire to understand. But I promised Rebecca I would support her and the baby, no matter what. Michael recounted how, over the next few years, he and Rebecca tried to make it work, living together for a while, even getting engaged, but eventually realized they weren't compatible for a long-term relationship. But when they parted, Michael promised he would always be there for his daughter. And then, I met you, Claire, he continued, with a sad smile. You were like sunshine after a lifetime of rain. I fell in love so completely, so intensely, but I was afraid that if I told you about Emily and Rebecca, I would lose you. So I convinced myself that I would tell you everything, eventually. But then, 1 month turned into 1 year, and 1 year into 5, and suddenly we were married, and it seemed impossible to say anything. Claire stopped the video, unable to continue watching. She stood up and crossed the room to the window, watching the rain that was now falling softly over Seattle. Everything she believed about her marriage was being rewritten as she breathed. After a few minutes, she returned to the computer and continued the video. I kept my promise to Rebecca and Emily as best I could, Michael was saying. The money, the visits a few times a year, under the guise of business trips or writing retreats. Emily grew up knowing I was her father, but respecting that I had another life. Rebecca eventually married a good man who's been more of a day-to-day father to Emily than I ever could be. Michael stopped, visibly struggling with his emotions. What I did was unforgivable, Claire. Not having Emily, she's the one purely good thing to come from all this mess. But lying to you, year after year, you deserved better. You deserved the truth. The screen blurred, and Claire realized she was crying. She wiped her tears with the sleeve of her sweater, one of Michael's sweaters that she had started wearing since he left. If you're watching this, it means I never found the courage to tell you face to face. And for that, I am truly sorry. In the bottom of the box is an envelope with Rebecca's contact information and recent pictures of Emily. She's studying literature at NYU now. Takes after her old man, I guess. Michael smiled weakly. She knows about you, Claire. I told her how amazing you are, how kind and understanding. That wasn't a lie. Michael looked down, then back at the camera with moist eyes. I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness, but please know that I loved you completely, Claire. My failure wasn't in loving you. It was in not trusting that your love was strong enough to handle the truth. And that's on me, not you. The video ended, and Claire was left staring at the dark screen, her reflection distorted by the monitor's pale glow. For the next few weeks, Claire lived in a kind of emotional limbo. There were moments when anger overcame everything. Anger at having been deceived, at all the times Michael had looked her in the eye and lied about where he was going or who he was with. There were other moments of profound sadness, not just at the loss of Michael, but at the loss of the marriage she thought she had had. "What are you going to do?" her sister, Diane, asked as they drank coffee in the small kitchen Claire had renovated with Michael 3 summers ago. Claire looked out the window at the backyard. The first spring flowers were beginning to bloom, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the man who had planted them was no longer there to watch them bloom. "I think I'm going to Portland," she finally answered. Diane nearly choked on her coffee. "To meet them. Are you sure that's a good idea?" Claire wasn't sure of anything anymore, except that she needed answers that Michael could no longer provide. Portland was sunny when Claire arrived, an ironic contrast to her somber mood. Rebecca had responded to Claire's email surprisingly quickly, agreeing to meet her at a cafe near Rose Park. Claire recognized Rebecca immediately when she walked into the cafe, though the woman in front of her was 20 years older than the one in the photograph. She carried the same kind of ethereal beauty that Claire could imagine attracting the young, romantic Michael she'd never met. "You must be Claire," Rebecca said, standing up. There was something wary, but not hostile, in her eyes. "Thank you for coming all this way." Claire nodded, unable to form words for a moment. It was surreal to be sitting across from the woman she hadn't even known existed until 3 weeks ago. "I wasn't sure if I should reach out," Claire finally began. "But after finding everything, I have so many questions." Rebecca nodded. "I understand. I've been expecting this conversation for almost 20 years. To be honest, Michael always said he would tell you eventually. But he never did," Claire said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "No," Rebecca agreed softly. "He never did." For the next 2 hours, Rebecca filled in the gaps that Michael's video had left. She talked about how Michael kept his financial commitment to Emily, how he visited a few times a year, how he was there for important milestones, albeit always behind the scenes. "He loved her," Rebecca said, "in his own way, within the constraints he created for himself. When Emily got accepted to NYU, he was the first person she called." Claire felt a stab of pain. How many calls had Michael gotten when he was with her, pretending to be from colleagues or his editor? Did Emily want to meet him properly, to be acknowledged? Claire asked. Rebecca took a sip of her tea before answering. "Kids are complicated. There were times when she was furious with him for not being a real dad. Other times, she accepted the situation. As she got older, I think she began to understand that adults make mistakes, make choices that paint us into corners that are hard to get out of." "I would like to meet her," Claire said, surprising herself. "If she's willing." Rebecca seemed to hesitate. "Emily's in town this weekend, actually. Spring break. I can ask her if she'd like to meet you." Claire nodded, feeling simultaneously terrified and determined. The park was quiet the next morning when Claire arrived, almost an hour ahead of schedule. She sat on a bench overlooking Portland's famous rose gardens, watching the people pass by. Couples holding hands, joggers with their dogs, seniors enjoying the spring sunshine. "Claire!" The voice behind her made Claire turn. There she was, Emily. Claire felt her heart skip a beat. The young woman before her was unmistakably Michael's daughter. There was his eyes, his stubborn chin, even the way he kept his head tilted slightly as he waited for an answer. "Emily," Claire replied, standing up, uncertain of protocol in this unprecedented situation. Handshake? Hug? Just an awkward wave. Emily settled the matter by stepping forward and extending her hand. It's weird to finally meet you. Dad talked about you a lot. Claire felt a lump in her throat at hearing Emily call Michael Dad so casually. Of course, she would call him that. He was her father. He never mentioned you, Claire said, then grimaced. I'm sorry. That sounded horrible. To her surprise, Emily laughed, a laugh so similar to Michael's that it was almost unearthly. It's okay, I know. That's kind of the whole point of this mess, isn't it? They began walking through the park, their initially awkward and hesitant conversation gradually turning into something easier. Emily was quick-witted and direct in a way Claire suspected came from her mother, but her love of literature and her tendency to ramble on about topics that moved her were pure Michael. He sent me a first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird when I graduated from high school, Emily said, as they sat by a small fountain. It had this huge dedication, all this emotional stuff about how I would be a better writer than him one day. It was the most dad thing he ever did, you know, something only a father would do. Claire swallowed. He was very proud of you. I can see that now, looking back at all the business trips to New York. Emily looked at her, studying her face. Are you mad at him? I would be furious. Claire considered the question, really considered it. I'm mad that he didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth, she finally answered. But I'm not mad that you exist, Emily. How could I be? You're part of him. Emily nodded, looking down at her hands. He was going to tell you, you know, after I graduated college. He said he wanted to introduce us properly. Had this whole plan about what it would be like to have your family finally complete. Claire felt the tears she had been holding at bay all morning finally spill over. He always was a planner, always thinking he had more time than he actually did. Emily, surprisingly, reached out and took Claire's hand. Can I show you something? From her backpack, she pulled out a book, a romance novel that Claire recognized immediately. It was Michael's last book, published 2 years earlier. Claire still had trouble opening it now that he was gone. Emily flipped to the dedication page and handed the book to Claire. There, in the printed words Claire had read dozens of times, was a message she had never truly understood before. To see my home, my heart, the woman who would accept me completely, if I would only have the courage to show myself completely. And to E, who taught me that love does not diminish when divided. It only multiplies in ways I never imagined possible. Claire ran her fingers over the letters as if she could feel Michael through them. He loved you, Emily said simply. That wasn't a lie. The 2 women Michael Matthews had loved, each in her own way, each sharing a different part of him, sat side by side as the fountain gushed behind them and the roses began to bloom in the spring sunshine. A year later, Claire returned to Portland. This time, she was no stranger on Rebecca's doorstep. She was greeted with a warm hug and a cup of tea already made just the way she liked it. In the backyard, Emily was setting a table for dinner. Beside her was Jake, her boyfriend, whom Claire had met during one of her visits to New York. As they sat down to dinner, this unexpected makeshift family, Claire realized that Michael had been right about one thing in his video. She was capable of more understanding and love than even he had believed. Perhaps, had she lived, he would have discovered that too. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the stories shared, Claire walked alone through the garden. She took out of her pocket the small stone she had taken from Michael's grave before leaving Seattle. It had become a habit to carry it, a tangible way to keep a part of him close. "You big, complicated idiot," she whispered to the night. "You should have known. I would have loved all of you, every messy, imperfect part." As she put the stone back in her pocket, Claire thought about how the truth, even though it had come late, even after he was gone, had given her something she had never expected to find again after Michael's death: a family. She had only discovered the truth after he had left, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for something new and unexpected to blossom from the ashes of that truth.